Hello again, everybody. This is Jen from Scrapping Posh. I am here with my part 3 tutorial, my 221B Baker Street building and stand. And on this video, we're going to finish decorating the outside and make this building three-dimensional, along with starting the stand. So here I am doing the back windows, and you've seen in part 2 where I had put the frames on the pattern paper, and now I'm just distressing those with the vintage photo in order to make them look a little more dimensional. And I am lining them up with my ruler just to make sure that they aren't out of line, because you would be able to tell fairly easily if they were not straight. Now, on these bottom windows, I am layering 2 pieces of cardstock, just scrap cardstock, under them in order to make it so that the bottom part of that window sits flat and doesn't go up at an angle. Sticking on those little scrap pieces of paper so that I can put the bottom half of the windows on, and squaring everything up with my ruler, making sure that everything is square. So that's pretty much the decoration for the back of the building. Now, the back of the building is going to hinge on like a door swing open. So I'm going to start putting these gussets to hold the building together on the front. And right now I'm just taking off the pieces where the stairs are, I can't put those gussets there. You could always add the gussets before you put the stairs on, but you won't be able to see it because it'll be covered up by the rest of the stairs. I'm just doing some precautionary scribbling there with my black permanent marker to make sure you can't see the chipboard. Now we'll just put this hinge on and wipe it off with a damp cloth where the glue has gushed out from the gusset. You do want to make sure that you have enough glue on there, because this is part of the structure. Now, because the awning is on the front, I can't lay it down flat and put that gusset on there, so again, I'm propping it up with my distressing pads. And I'm going to lay it on my craft mat and make sure that it's square that way. Now I'm putting this piece of chipboard I'm going to use this piece of chipboard that you see at the bottom there to make sure that that's square before I put everything back on. Like there, that's what I'm talking about. So the chipboard's a 90-degree angle, so now I know that that wall is at a 90-degree angle, and I put that little extra piece of chipboard under there for a gusset. And like I said before, I didn't think I was going to expose the sub shop from the inside, so I didn't really care that you could see that gusset. Turns out that it's close enough to the next floor up that you can't see it, so it's still in there. Now, I just and I'm in the process of putting gussets on this wall. I end up tearing this wall out, so my recommendation is just not to put it in yet and wait till the floor is on to put it in, because that's when I end up putting it in. See, the problem is that I put it flush with the bottom of the building, and the floor actually goes on the inside to inside corner, so it ends up not being correct, which it wasn't a big deal to fix, but just so you don't have to put it on and take it back off, just leave it off. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this side that I did with the other side, and that's make this gusset for the left wall, and I'm cutting out a spot for the steps again. And just make sure that you have enough glue to get that stuck on there good. And by putting the gussets on the inside and the outside, you assure that it's pretty much not going to go anywhere. And those are 1-inch gussets. So you have about, you do a 1-inch gusset and you score it at 1/2 inch. The Cameo silhouette cut file that I created, if you're using that, it comes with 4 of these gussets, which are the ones that I just used, but you're going to need a whole lot more. So I just took a whole bunch of scrap pieces of paper, cut them down at 1 inch, and then scored them at 1/2 inch. So you've seen that wall go on, gussets on the inside and outside. Make sure they're at 90 degrees before you let them dry. And now I'm measuring for the floor. And this building's actually going to have 3 floors, one at the bottom level, one on top of the sub shop level, and then one all the way on top of, like, I would call it the attic level. So this is my bag of scrap chipboard that I have from just random mini albums that I make. And I keep all my scraps because I make mini albums, and they're always good for buildings. So now I'm just doing some measurements. And like I said before, I don't want the building to sit on top. I want the floors to go into the building. So they have to fit from wall to wall. And sorry about the focus, it goes in and out because this is 14 inches high, and it's just hard for my camera to focus on that, but it's pretty good for the most part. So once I get the correct size, and you see me keep putting it in there and testing it, and it should be about the same size as the walls. That's what I was doing there. Once I get the right size, I duplicate it twice. So there you go. I finally got the right size, and this is when I figure out that I can't use the floor that's on there. So I rip it up. Okay, so I've determined now that that floor is the right size. And I think I'm going to make a whole bunch of gussets so that I can have gussets on the top, bottom, left, and right of all 3 floors. And again, I apologize for the focus. So I don't have an exact measurement of these floors for you. My apologies. It's just kind of a trial and error thing. So always cut big, and then, you can cut it down. Now I'm just making more 1-inch gussets. So just all this scrap paper that I have left over from all my projects. And I'm using the black in case you can see it through my decoration. And I just cut them all 1-inch strips, and then I score them all at 1/2 inch. And I'm cutting them down to the size of those floors. So I got 3 floors, so I got 6 gussets. From the long side, I'm going to call it the 6-inch side. And then I'm going to need 12 gussets for the left and right, the 4-inch sides. And now I'm dealing with this mess, and I just can't stand it anymore. So all these extra cuts I'm going to put away in this little Project Life container, which is a great container to have handy while you're doing these big projects. Okay, so now that I've got rid of my clutter, I'm just going to take and fold these 1/2 inch gussets, or these 1-inch gussets. And they're not even scored, I'm just folding them in half, because as long as you have a fold there, it's going to be, you can make it whatever angle you want. So as long as I make sure that the floors are sitting at 90 degrees, they'll be at 90 degrees. Okay, so now I'm putting the floor in, and I'm just double checking all the sizes just to make sure they're the right size. And on the bottom floor, I'm only going to use the gusset on the top and on the left and the right, because the outside's already decorated, so I can't put the gussets on the outside. Okay, so you just need to make sure that your gussets are completely flush with the edge of the chipboard. And now I'm just measuring. It's going to be easier for me to put the pattern paper on this, obviously, before I glue it into the building. And then on the edges, I just use the black permanent marker. If I had black chipboard, I wouldn't have to do this step. And I'm going to distress it with some vintage photo and stick it in there. Remember, at this point in time, I still intend that you won't be able to see the sub shop, so I only worry about the right side. Now again, I prop up my project on those vintage, or those Tim Holtzing pads, so that I don't smash my steps and my awning. Now I line up this bottom floor with the bottom of the project of the building, and just make sure all the gussets are stuck on there. And it looks good. I just use my bone folder to make sure that those gussets made contact 100%. So before I do much more on the inside, I'm going to finish up some decoration on the outside. I just cut another 1/4 inch strip for the steps in front of the sub shop, and that's from chipboard. And then I just glued it directly on top of the other steps. Now I took these, it was one of the ephemera cards, or actually it was on the 12 by 12, maybe the 8 by 8 cut apart. And there was a guy there, and I liked the way he was standing, so I cut him out on some pattern paper and just put so it made a silhouette within that door. And this is pretty much the whole reason why I decided to leave that open, is because you wouldn't be able to see it. You wouldn't be able to see that silhouette if I closed that off, because there wouldn't be any light coming through. Now, for that bottom step there, I just put a 1-inch strip all the way across so that it would come out further. And I glued that to the top step, and I put washi tape on it. Now, what you see me doing here is I did the same thing that I had done with the first windows, and you're going to see me do it again, so no worries if you missed that. And I was looking at the front of my building, and I thought, Mrs. Hudson would never allow her apartments to go so undecorated. So I thought that I needed some curtains. So I just took more vellum and another window frame and cut a doily behind each one of the curtains, or behind each one of the panes. And I really like the way that looks. Now these very small pieces of trim, I'm just putting right along the bottom just to give it some dimension, to make it look like there's a small eave hanging over. And then I'm going over the doily parts that are sticking out with my black permanent marker. Now I'm going to take that Sherlock, cut apart on the same piece that I used for the guy standing in the door. And I'm going to make a silhouette to go under the other window. So here I'm going to take all the window frames again and glue them onto the vellum, and you'll see the whole doily process here if you missed it. I'm going to just take this vellum, trim it. I'm going to put the silhouette of that man that I cut out of Sherlock and stick it behind the window so it looks like he's walking back and forth. And my daughter said that that was actually in an episode of Sherlock. He was walking back and forth across this window, so perfect. I didn't even know it. And then I just took those doilies, cut the frilly parts off, and made another curtain. Now, these curtains have both left and right sides, and then it has the hanging eave, I don't know what it's called, thing at the top. And then the other windows I'm going to do also, but they're just going to have the ones hanging from the top. The valance, I guess it's called. And then again, I'm just putting these little extra pieces on here to give it some dimension. Try and make it look like a real house. Okay, and then you'll see me do this with the other 4 windows on the front, and the windows on the back are going to stay just the way they are, pretty plain. They do have the vintage photo distress on them. So I got a piece of acetate here. I don't know if you guys can see it, and I'm putting glue on the window frames and not worrying about what comes off of them because I had that acetate under there, and I'm kind of wiping it down with my fingers and smearing it out so that the glue sticks better. And I got just as much adhesive on my hands when I was using the sticky dots, so that didn't really matter. And I took these doilies and I cut them into 6, and I'm just going to, like I said, put a little piece of a doily at the top of each window to make valances in the front, for the front of the building. going over the outside with the black permanent marker so that the pieces of doily that are sticking out and the pieces of doily that maybe is a little more dimensional, you can't tell that they're white. And then I just glue those on using the vellum tape runner, which seems to be working better. Or maybe it's just that the doily distracts from the fact that it's darker, or it's not as clear as the other parts. And I do the same for these tiny windows up at the top. Okay, so now I'm putting aside 221B Baker Street. I'm going to start on the stand. The stand is 2 inches tall by 6 by 8, and it has a drawer in it with a hidden spot for whatever you decide to put under there. So I have these two 8 by 6 chipboards and a 2 by 8, which is the one at the top, two 2 by 6s for the left and the right side, and I think it's two 2 by 3s, and that's for the front, where for either side of the drawer, giving me a 5-inch drawer. Now, I said before that I cut up all my black cardstock scraps to these hinges, and what I'm doing now is the same thing that I did with the floor. You get a hinge, you put the hinge on the inside, you glue it down, and I'm lining the two sides up on this one so that the outside leg actually sits on top of the bottom. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I put the drawer in there, it should still be a 2-inch drawer because it's going to give me the length of the width of the chipboard. Because it's sitting on top of the other chipboard. So I should be able to fit that drawer in there even though it's 2 inches. So on this one, I did a little bit different. I put the gusset on the bottom first, and then I laid the chipboard on top and adhered the leg of the project that way. I also put the gussets on the corners going vertically, inside and outside. And this ensures that your project will stay at 90 degrees and that you don't have things falling over or something getting knocked out of place. By the time you get done with this, it's almost like you nailed it together. It's very sturdy if you use these hinges on the inside and out, and make sure that you use enough glue. So essentially what you see me do is just putting this together exactly the way that, I just told you. Gussets inside and outside. The walls are sitting on top of the bottom. And you do gussets wherever you have a seam. The only place that you won't be able to put gussets on this is to hold the top on. And you'll even be able to gusset one of the 4 walls. Now you see I got a little bubble in this gusset here. And the way you fix that is you just take an X-Acto knife and you split it open and then smooth it back down with some glue. And then you see my two, actually those aren't 3 by 2s. I think those are 1.5 by 2s, giving me a 6-inch drawer. No, it's 1.5 by 2, giving me an 8-inch drawer. 5-inch drawer. Sorry. I said I had 3 by 2 strips, but they're not. They're 2 or 1.5 by 2 strips. Now, it, I'm just gonna reiterate that those are 2 1.5 by 2-inch strips, which will give me a 5-inch drawer. Sorry for the confusion. And the video skipped ahead. I just think I missed some footage, and all I did was put chipboard pieces on the inside, on either side of where the drawer is gonna go, so that one, it gives the drawer a slide, but two, it also gives the top support, because the top is gonna need that support when that drawer's not in there. If that building's sitting on top of it with like the mini album in it, it's heavy. So essentially that part's done. And now I'm going to start with the drawer. And I'm just going to put a piece of black cardstock on the base here because it's visible. If you pull that drawer out, you're going to be able to see at least a couple inches in there. So I just take the black permanent marker along the edge, and then I'll put that black cardstock in so that when you pull out the drawer, you don't see the raw chipboard. Okay, now what I'm doing is measuring the opening just to make sure that, with the buildup of the chipboard, you end up with some dimensions that are a little shorter. So I'm actually putting the chipboard and building it up inside that hole that I've made for the drawer, and just marking it off where I should cut it. And then without gluing it together, I stick it all in there to make sure that it fits. And then I'll start gluing it together. And then I just want to make sure that everything is the same height. So again, I'm measuring, just matching the back with the front. And I'm putting everything together to make sure that everything's flush once it's adhered. Now I'm just cutting for the bottom of the drawer. And how it slides perfectly in there. Now, what ends up happening is when I do that, I add an extra layer to it. So I'm actually one thickness of chipboard too high. And I go ahead and put those drawers together and then sand off the rest with a fine sanding pad. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. So here I am just putting the drawer together the same way I put the rest of the stand together. Right, I have about 2 minutes left in this video, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you that part 4 of the tutorial hopefully will be up shortly. And we'll finish up the stand and begin working on the inside of the house again. So I thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please leave me a comment, or if you need it answered quickly, you can email me at scrappingposh@gmail.com. Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed the video.